All right, in this we're going to go ahead and start cleaning up with the healing brush some of these little dust scratches and imperfections. I'm going to just check my brush size. You can take a look at that. And the hardness is in approximately the center, so it's not too hard, not too soft. And you can see that I'm going to go ahead and clean some stuff up just by clicking on it. Even though you can click and drag right now for most of these dots, just clicking on it is going to work. And what it does is it automatically approximates the pixels that should be there based on a lot of the surrounding pixels, and it does that for you automatically so that you don't have to take samples. I'll just keep clicking on some of these. And I want you to notice this color damage right here. Even though we're not going to mess with it right now, I'm going to change the color mode to grayscale because if we discard the color channels, then you see that the values are evened out and we don't have to worry about sampling all of those differently colored areas from around each other. Okay. And I want you to also make sure that you are always zooming in with the zoom tool so that you can see as you're repairing stuff what it really looks like in the texture sections, and also to be zooming back out as well. And then you can also check to look at the healing brush's current settings, and I recommend that you sort of test them trying different settings in different types of situations when you're using the healing brush, because sometimes you can actually get good results with different settings, like whether it's a proximity or whether it's content aware or even whether it's to use a texture. Because you'll notice that when we're zoomed in, that as we use this healing brush, it's actually sort of blurring out some of that texture, which at 100% is okay. So as long as at 100% it's okay, then we're good. But if you do too much in one spot, then when you zoom back out, sometimes it can look bad. The other thing too is, see, I just undid something. I want you to notice that if I turn the brush down, I can get more detail. So don't always use the same giant brush or same small brush. And then when you're working on the edge right there, you want to notice that, in that case I need to redo it. Sometimes you have to go just off the edge to make something look right. Whenever you're on the edge of something, it's really important that it still maintains the integrity of that edge. And we'll just keep clicking on some of these just to show you some of the ways that you can improve this this file. And you have to kind of be careful. Some of these places we can get away with some slightly different colored values, but in a lot of them we can't. And like right there on the edge, you see how it keeps sort of popping out the edge a little bit. So I keep trying to test and then that one looks good. I keep trying to test it so that it maintains the edge integrity of that iris of the eye. And again, you'll see how whenever I'm clicking on the edge of something, I don't always click dead center. I try to approximate how it's going to continue the edge of something. Just keep going up here in the dark area in the hair, and you'll notice I'm not clicking and dragging in a lot of these spots, and a big reason I'm not is because when you click and drag, sometimes it will start to create a blur or a smear, and that's not what I want to happen, because then it'll start to look like I used a paintbrush to create hair. What I really want to happen is I want to make sure by clicking that it's really putting properly sampled nearby pixels in that place that I'm clicking, so that it carries along an appropriate texture from the nearby pixels. When you click and drag, sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't work as well. And sometimes you have to actually correct a lot by clicking in these sections before you start to click and drag. So here I'm creating that larger section of corrected hair sampling, and then I can start to do more with it. Okay, so I'm going to blow back up zoom back in, and I want to start repairing some of this eye section and then getting into this eyebrow, because this eyebrow needs to be rebuilt. And again, we're still using the healing brush. You see, you have to start being careful in here because now it's starting to get too pale and it's cutting the eyebrow out. So I have to go back, and I need to use the patch tool, because I can actually get a better, uh, see if I use the patch tool, if I click on what I want to replace and then drag it to an area where I can replace it, and you'll notice that I've got my setting up at the top as a content aware. It kind of worked, but it was getting too much of it. So I really need to start with the smaller area, and I need to rebuild the smaller spaces before I can start to use them in larger spaces. And it's going to be really tempting at first, especially if you watch a lot of, the Adobe tutorials and stuff. And if you're going based on the book, it's going to show you really simple examples where you can use these gigantic content aware patch replacements, but it doesn't really always work out that well. Sometimes you have to really use smaller sections. Now this section, however, I can use a really large section for my resampling. All right, so here this is going to get replaced, but because the area next to it is so clean and so well built that it's so similar, it really comes across quite nicely to use a large section for replacing. And I can do this the same, but you'll notice that I'm kind of keeping some of these sections a little bit smaller in the patch tool, because then I can better identify. I don't have to go quite so far away. The further you go away from something that you're trying to replace, a lot of times it's going to look worse, because you have less control over the pixels that are sort of, being sampled and replaced and blended. And you don't want them to be that dissimilar. So let's try this section, see how it fares, and that one's not too bad, although it is a little bit light down at the bottom. And so what I might want to do is choose the dodge tool, or excuse me, the burn tool. And I need to change the brush size a little bit. And you can see I can kind of burn that area so that it blends in a little bit better. So this is another option for you to come in and start playing around as well. Okay, let's zoom back out and take a look at how that looks. And so what I also sort of try to do as a strategy, but I'm going to take a snapshot, because a snapshot allows me now to have a place to go back to, so that it's not killing the RAM. All right, you see that's my original state, and then this is the state that I got to when I took my snapshot. And so this will help me preserve what I'm doing. Okay, and then now I can go back with the healing brush and I can clean up longer scratches, and this is how you can do that. And this is working really well because the pixels that are surrounding this long scratch area are extremely well preserved, and they're well built. So it has a lot of good sample material to pull from. And I'm just going to kind of come and clean up a little bit at a time. You'll notice one of my strategies, though, is that I'm not like diving into any one single place way too heavily at once. I kind of like to take the approach that I go around the picture and I kind of address lots of different places in the picture. And what that allows me to do is provide some consistency in the way that I'm treating the entire image. If you sit down and you spend, a really long time in one area without addressing anything else and kind of looking at the larger picture, sometimes you can get bogged down in detail of one area and it ends up looking different than, say, when you sit down to address it later. So I'm just going to keep on cleaning up some of this scratch material. And you'll notice that I'm leaving some of the scratchy stuff that's in those eyelashes because I don't want to drag a long line across. And you'll notice there I had just dragged sort of sideways because you also want to look at the grain of texture, grain of skin, and make sure you're not dragging in the wrong direction. And this one's safe just to drag straight down. And then, you know, if you're not sure, just drag and then just undo with your Command Z or Control Z. And you can undo it or jump into your history if you don't like something you've done. Okay, so that seems to be working out all right. Just keep cleaning up some little spots here. And you'll notice also that my brush isn't too large. I want to try to keep my brush just a little bit bigger than sample, but for the most part, in this case, about the same size as the sample, or the scratch that's a problem, because I don't want to grab too much data, otherwise it might end up blurring it too much. Especially, you know, with the brush that's not completely a hard brush. So this kind of is working out so far, so good. And then I can change my brush size. Now that I've got a larger spot to deal with, I can make my brush size bigger without as much worry that it's gonna make it too funky looking. And now I'm getting to a place where if I zoom out, you can see if I keep using that large healing brush, I might have a problem if I do too much with that healing brush, because it kind of blurred it a little bit. So instead of like doing the click and drag, just clicking in some spots is helpful, but you see it still got a little bit blurry, so I might want to take a different approach. And in this case, I can just click a few more places and see how it works out. And that might be as far as I want to go. And now I think I need to get the patch tool, and I need to use it so that I can kind of duplicate in a more deliberate way instead of just trusting Photoshop to make all those decisions for me. And this is definitely a good case where the patch tool is going to be very useful. And then that looks a lot better than pretty much anything that healing brush could have done, where it would have like softened up the edges too much. I'm going to take back my healing brush now and go back and fix some more scratches. And these are all pretty good scratches and little dust marks to be able to use the brush for. And that one, I backed it out and I undid it because this is sort of like a weird little light spot blemish. I need to go in and zoom in and pay closer attention because it didn't look quite right to me. And sometimes you just have to try a few different things before you can get it to be the way that you really think that it looks right. So don't just settle because you did something and you're ready to move on. Make sure that you're going to be okay with the way that it looks. Otherwise, you know, if you know something doesn't look quite right, then it's really not going to look right. Okay, so it's a little bit better. Still have to undo it. I'm not quite happy. Now if I take the spot healing brush, I want to go up to the top. I start messing around with the eyes. And the thing is if I decide that I want to come back to that other area after I clean everything else up and zoom out to 100%, then I can do that. But right now, I want to deal with the eyes. So you might take that approach.